So this uh, essay or this video is going to be about the history of the global working class struggle, specifically as it pertains to baseball cards. And it's such a fascinating intersection. And it's something we've explored a couple of times now from different angles, especially regarding the T3 Turkey Red, the concept of the coupon redemption system for cigarettes that were purchased by uh, the common person in early modern America, as well as the concept with the T3s around uh, beautiful works of art for the working class, right? Mass produced lithographic, hand retouched works of art that were provided through this coupon redemption system to be displayed in the homes of people who otherwise would not have such high level works of art. And the T3s themselves were extremely colorful, vibrant, high contrast, beautifully designed with figures that incorporated patterns and techniques and structures that actually anticipated some of the greater modernist perspectives, such as alienation in an industrial world, and the way that those figures were sculpted, as we discussed with painters like Otto Diess, or the Surrealist movement at large, as well as constructivists and Dadaism. You can see the the fomenting perspective that's taking place there. And those T3s were made in 1910, 1911. So you're looking at something that actually anticipates by a couple of years the modernist movements that spring up in Europe in the mid to late 1910s. So specifically as it pertains to baseball cards, there is something beautifully immortal about them in terms of how they are representative of a moment in time, especially the early modern baseball card, let's say from 1900 to maybe 1940. Representative of a certain moment in time, and yet to themselves hold a timelessness in that what they were created as and for, both as you can see here with this George Sisler American Caramel E126, as a marketing tool, right, to help sell caramels, to help sell candies, to help sell cigarettes. And this slowly shifts with the introduction of companies that specialize in baseball cards for baseball cards' sake, themselves as a art historical commodity, such as Topps or Bowman in the 1950s. The creation of these cards as marketing tools in the grand scheme of the development and cultivation of American industrial capitalism creates this underclass or working class of art form, which is the industrially reproduced work of art that's handheld. It's a piece of pocket art, whether that's a photograph or a lithographic drawing or rendering of a figure, that is kept and held by someone who is the child of a laborer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or someone who purchases bread from the local bakery, in terms of the Tip Top 1910 Pittsburgh Pirates set in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You're looking at an ecosystem which is regionally and locally located that is creating industrial works of art in terms of the mass production of baseball cards due to the popularity specifically of the sport of baseball as a culture. And then again, baseball images as something that are in incredibly high demand from the late 1800s onward, in terms of the sense of creating a mass participation network in the national movement of baseball itself. People who otherwise cannot see a game of baseball are relying on a baseball card image or an image that's printed and published in the newspapers to commune with this force of such great cultural interest and fervor. You see this most commonly with the early World Series games in terms of the extreme presence, the media presence at the time. There's a large press and photojournalistic presence for these events to communicate them across the nation to those who otherwise are physically unable to attend. Right? So this is the power of the news media, of photography itself at the period of time. So when you look at baseball cards as being so emblematic of the working class struggle, what we're talking about is we're talking about looking layers deeper than just some like an individual work of art or an individual human being or person. We're looking at an ecosystem and a mechanism of cultural production, which is happening altogether, like entirely, completely, and thoroughly through local industrial food producers, cigarette producers, and goods producers, such as clothing stores. Even going into car stores or car manufacturers. You're looking at an ecosystem that is cultivated within the larger, spiking, peaking American industrial manufacturing ecosystem, which is goods that are created in the United States of America for the American population, and therein are containing this additional level of marketing material, which is meant to draw customers toward their product. But this additional level of marketing material is again an American cultural phenomenon underlaying the larger American socio-political event of industrialization through these local and regional manufacturing plants. Again, caramels, candies, cigarettes, tobacco. This is an ecosystem of production, and much as we discussed in terms of American tobacco, and their use of the automatic cigarette roller to increase production multiple in terms of their ability to create cigarettes with speed. This is the ecosystem that baseball cards are acting within as this hidden major modern art movement. So when you look at these cards, and particularly again how they're framed or encased in a modern context, it's easy to understand the subconscious recognition that's occurring at a collective level of these handheld pocket lithographies, which are usually, especially in the early modern context, written on the back of with a promotion or an advertisement of a store or a brand for a company. There's a recognition at the collective subconscious level of what these artifacts and these remnants of American history really are, which are themselves works of art. But they are by no artist. Rather, they are works of art created by early American industrializing companies, local and regional manufacturers, and that itself being a system where these cards are being outsourced to lithographers, such as the American Lithography Company, in the case of the Turkey Red T3s. This is a contract with the American Lithography Company in New York and American Tobacco to produce these works of art, to mass produce and reproduce them using artisanal techniques in order to create an accessible marketing tool, marketing object underlying the commodity or the good that's being sold by said company. So this is something that's historically unprecedented because you're looking at a major art movement that relies on mass production as a cultural mode, and not only relies on mass production, but uses mass production as a footstool to create its biggest innovation, which is handheld pocket lithographic art for the masses, which is all based around and centered around and depicting the most important cultural movement that's occurring in said civilization at the time, which is baseball. And when you look at these cards, and I think this E126 is a great example. I think this is one of the greatest caramel sets ever created in terms of the composition, the succinctness of the descriptions, as well as the promotional aspect on the back, collecting player coupons, right? One receipt of 15 cents in stamps, we will send a blank album to any address in the United States. Manufactured by American Caramel. This was manufactured just before the American Caramel Company went out of business. And they were really one of the longest running caramel card producers in America. You're looking at, again, something so telling about this being labeled as Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is early industrial America. Pennsylvania is one of the epicenters of that, especially with Pittsburgh and the outlying coal towns and coal country in the area. You're looking at a relic of early mass production, and you're looking at a relic of how early mass production functioned and how early marketing tools subconsciously became a major art movement. And the reason why I say major art movement here is not only because when you look at objects like this, especially even in terms of the photographic choices, there's a Babe Ruth that actually has a photo montage on it as one of the cards in this set. Not only in terms of the photographic choices and the layouts of these cards, but the diversity in the methods in which they were produced as a way of creating marketing competition. You have companies like the DeLong Gum Company. You have Gowdy Gum, Worldwide Gum. You have many of these different caramel companies, cigarette companies, gum companies that are competing for market space in this early industrial capitalist environment of America. And this is a economic race that is occurring domestically in real time. And the way that these companies figure out how to gain further foothold in the market beyond just the power of the product is providing the larger American public with a hitherto undocumented or unrealized service, which is access to baseball images and participation in baseball imagery as a communal event, wherein many of these people do not have the ability to actually attend these events, to take the trips to attend these events. Nonetheless, to say that they own any aspect of this cultural phenomenon that they feel so spiritually or emotionally or psychologically engaged in. And I've spoken about stories where people will say, they stood by the radio just sitting out on the porch on the farm in Missouri listening to the Gas House Gang in the Depression era, just on the farm and following and tracking this team and their exploits through the year of 1934. We're talking about a level of devotional theater and cultural theater that is captivating the nation at the deepest level. And baseball cards serve a profound function in the sense that they allow for the average person, let's say that's a young child at a general store in Oklahoma, or a miner or a factory worker in Pennsylvania or in the Appalachian, to own a piece of that history it's not speculative, it's not imaginative. It's actually a real representative function and device that says this is a part of baseball. This is George Sisler, first baseman for the St. Louis Americans, and here is his baseball card. In owning and possessing this baseball card, you own or possess an aspect of American baseball culture and history. And that, to me, in a socially realist sense, is actually far more profound than art itself, in the sense that it's produced by a single individual as an interpretation or a reflection of a cultural event, or the personal or uh, even ancestral imagination or psyche. What this is the communal mass cultural psyche that's being mass produced by local and regional companies in terms of a lithographic design. And many of these are very creative. They're far outside the realm of just photography and composition of image and text. Um, in terms of use of color, wild lime greens or deep purple backgrounds that are in high contrast. We discussed a lot of that in the 1939 Play Ball Aesthetics of Austerity essay. Just the extreme amount of difference in creativity that's actually, as a total ecosystem of the early modern baseball card from 1900 to 1940, is incredibly profound when you look at that whole ecosystem of the different set designs, including the Cracker Jacks with the blood red backgrounds. You have to flip them over and flip them upside down to read the text. Like I mentioned, the DeLong gum, you have a figure, black and white figure in front of an enlarged color background stadium. The creativity that's exhibited through the marketing for these early modern American companies is so highly underrecognized as an art movement, specifically because it's social realism beyond even interpretation. It's just the pure presentation of the fragment or the chip or the shard of the object of the collective cultural communal imagination, which is the fascination with baseball. And it presents it as it is and as it stands, with a simple advertisement for the company on the back saying, this is who we are, this is a coupon that you can redeem, or this is how many players are in the checklist of the set. Most of the early modern cards function in that way, including the early caramels and the early tobaccos. They don't actually even have any player biography. They just function specifically as marketing tools. So when you look at this and you see the power that underlies these early cards, I think you're looking at something that hitherto historically has been hidden or marginalized or obfuscated, specifically because it is working class culture. It is contracted, of course, at the highest level by the company executives to sell the product. But these cards themselves are being designed and manufactured by working class artisans at lithography companies, and they're being packaged into products that are being used by everyday working class people. So this is a subversive construction of an art market that rather is not an art market at all, but it's a commodities market of essential goods that are being purchased by the everyday person, and as such, they are participating and they gain access to and are participating in perhaps the most important major art movement in American history. And the reason why this would be so and is so is because this is not one person. This is not even a group of people acting as individuals. This is a collective, subconscious, psychological function that is the massive explosion of the 20th century industrial revolution in America, and coinciding with and along the creation of media in terms of mass production of images to create a network of cultural understanding, that we culturally are envisioning and visualizing the same things and thus know them to be true or know certain other things to be untrue. And this is the news media as it pertains to photojournalism and photography. Um, and this, again, is what is so important about specifically photographic baseball cards, even going back to the old judge cards. Um, you're looking at a technology that's revolutionary in terms of what it allows people to participate in and how. A real image representation that is authentic or true to the real, at least in terms of when you flatten the three-dimensional down into two dimensions in terms of the creation of an image. Participation in a visualization and representation of the real that is true to the real, and as such creates across time, across borders and bounds, the ability to participate in that historical moment or in that historical event through an understanding that goes beyond words and directly into the hidden unspoken language of sight and seeing, and thus of an implicit visual agreement that exists below and beneath the image itself. So that art movement, in terms of this mass production, is so undervalued because of just how egalitarian and populist it really is. It's something that wouldn't be allowed to be seen as art in a modern context because it doesn't elevate itself above its basic function and essential purpose, which is to propagate baseball imagery, allow for access into baseball history, and to sell a product through that premise as an additional marketing add-on to that premise. And that changes in the 1950s with Topps and Bowman and baseball cards for baseball cards' sake, right? The removal of gum, the removal of tobacco, even though there are still companies who do that, like Red Man Tobacco or Red Heart Dog Food. They still include and incorporate baseball cards into the food product or the everyday good. But this is something that is rapidly becoming outmoded by the baseball card as by and for itself, which is indicative, again, of the subconscious mass cultural psychological metabolism of the idea and concept behind baseball cards and the realization that they are, in fact, themselves essential cultural artifacts and an art historical phenomenon that extends. It's really a movement of 100 years that occurs in America. So, again, looking at the way that these cards are framed, this is something that is just occurring just beneath the conscious mind, I think, in a collective sense. The way that these cards are framed in their plastic casings, as well as how they are remembered in terms of historical collections, let's say intergenerational collections. When you look at art history, it's the passage of a painting down through institutions or wealthy donors or financiers. You're looking at a marketplace that is specifically devoted and dedicated to uplifting the art historical cultural artifact into the stratosphere of an investment. And what you're really looking at in terms of baseball card history, particularly early baseball card history, is that the card itself exists for the card itself. It's actually a realization and a perfection of the tenets and mode behind art as a creative process. It's that it should exist for and by itself, and as such is not commodified. The funny thing about these baseball cards is that they are not a commodity. They're an addition onto a commodity in terms of a marketing tool, which is to say, have this piece of art or have this piece of history, have this fragment of baseball culture in the purchase of our product. This is something you don't see as much, if at all, anymore, in terms of this level of understanding in early modern American industry of how to perform marketing as a function. there's a real offering that's being given here. This is coming within a purchase of American Caramel products. We are offering you something actually meaningful and important, which is something you can own, a physical object that you can possess, that is integral to our country and our nation's history and culture. That level of marketing, again, it anticipates just decades later Topps and Bowman and the advent of the baseball card for a baseball card's sake, and the removal of this marketing process, because what it reveals is that the offering that's remembered here is the baseball card in terms of American caramel or in terms of American tobacco. The offering that is cemented in the cultural memory, whether or not you want to call it art history or not, these are indelible aspects of American cultural history in terms of being relics and artifacts. What is cement? It's not even the product that was created by these companies. It's the baseball cards. And this is something that you can only look back at historically and understand the subconscious bubbling up of this urgent process. And it makes sense that such a hidden art historical movement would occur so innocuously and behind the veil of the development of the American corporate capitalist environment and perspective, because it's a movement that occurs so rapidly and scales so vastly and so quickly. It's a movement of such large cultural forces, in coalition with the increased literacy and presence of baseball as a national cultural phenomenon in terms of access to images and access to the network of baseball through photography. This collision course of the demand for baseball images, as well as the cutthroat, monopolistic creation of trusts, which also you see that in baseball as well, right? With the Federal League antitrust lawsuit of the 1920s against Major League Baseball. The crossroads of these two major phenomena. One is more cultural, artistic, and athletic. The other is more industrial, economic, and social and political in terms of its effects. The subconscious bridge there in terms of the shrewdness of business of these rapidly scaling corporate entities to say, we're going to incorporate this totem or this relic or this object that provides this added level to our product or our good by way of creating access in that place that the entire nation is clamoring for, which is access to baseball images and baseball culture. Access to the baseball game without being able to be there or having to be there even. So to have that kind of art movement emerge so innocuously, and when you look at a card like this, it's a black and white, it's a very small, this fits in your hand. There's no frills to it. Even this is what I love about this kind of late caramel design. It's been stripped of the frills and the colors that would be able to kind of give you the convenient argument that, oh, this is a art historical artifact or this is a work of art. These have been stripped down to their most basic and essential parts and components as a sort of ruthless minimalist perfection of the baseball card, at least in an early modern context, right? There's no backs being added to these cards in terms of statistics and biographies. Although you do have that in the 1914 Cracker Jack. This represents the ethos, I think, in a lot of ways, of this early American modern industrial mind. and psychology, as well as the ethos of early American baseball. It is something that has been distilled, sharpened, clarified. Even the lack of color itself says something about the art historical aesthetic of this part of American history. So that's what I got. Thanks for watching.